share my screen actually, if it's okay, so that we can have the slides and everything. 1 second. Okay. Oops, 1 second. Yeah, so before I start, apologies for the delay in getting started. So I'm Jenny. I am a internal dev at nwPlus, and I'm a 4th year business and computer science student. And yeah, so today I'll be just talking about the fundamentals of web development and just going through HTML and CSS with you guys. And yeah, so just a couple of pre-workshop setup notes before we get started. Because we will be coding on a text editor, you really have to have something installed on your machine. So we recommend a Visual Studio Code, and we do have a couple of recommended extensions as well, just to make your coding experience a little bit more smooth and easier on you. And during the workshop as well, if you have any questions, please direct them to the Web Dev Workshop channel. And I've also included the link for our Slack workspace, so please join if you have not already. And yeah, if you ever get lost as well, I've included the source code for what I'm going to talk about. So I've also split it into multiple parts. So if you ever get lost, just feel free to go into here and you'll be able to catch up. And we also offer one-on-one help in breakout rooms with our TAs. If you do need help, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us. And so going back to what I mentioned earlier, so we will be talking about the fundamentals of web development. So that includes HTML and CSS. And from a development point of view, this is really important because it's basically the fundamentals are everything when you want to learn other frameworks such as React or Angular or Vue, which is very popular, I guess, currently. And when you're first picking up these frameworks, if you don't have a solid understanding of these concepts like HTML and CSS, it's a lot harder to pick things up. So this workshop will give you a good fundamental of that you can base off of in terms of picking up other frameworks that are more advanced. And yeah, so by the end of this workshop, you'll learn what you exactly need to construct a simple web page and understand the fundamentals of HTML and CSS. And then at the end, we will give you some instructions to publish your code to GitHub pages. And this is really simple, but it's optional. Really depends on if you want to further enhance your work or if you want to publish it. So yeah, we'll just give you the steps regardless. And so this is just a breakdown of what we're covering today. So we'll first talk about the basics of HTML, and then we'll go into CSS. But while we're going through the concepts, we'll also be building the project along the way. And then last but not least, we'll be deploying our portfolio to GitHub pages. And this is totally optional, but we do have the instructions for you guys. And yeah, so I'll jump right into it. So HTML, believe it or not, is actually not a coding language. It's a markup language that is the code that is used to structure a web page and its content. So it is a markup language, and it just describes the structure of a web page and its content. And HTML consists of a series of elements that can enclose or wrap different parts of your content to make it appear in a certain way. So in essence, HTML defines what is being displayed on the page. And you'll learn later that CSS, I guess CSS will implement more of the styling to make it look a little bit more appealing. And in HTML, we also have enclosing tags that can make a word or image or hyperlink to somewhere else. And you can also make it italicized words or make fonts bigger or smaller. But like I mentioned, most of the styling is actually done in CSS. So yeah, we'll learn about that later as well. And so just the basic usage of HTML. So for example, if we had this following snippet, my cat is very grumpy. If we wanted to make this line just stand on its own, we would specify that it's a paragraph by enclosing it in paragraph text. So I mentioned earlier that HTML, you have these tags that enclose your elements basically. And here, I'm just going to briefly go over the anatomy of an HTML element. So like I mentioned earlier, we have these tags that enclose your content, and content is what goes between the tags. And what we refer to as an element is that includes the opening tag, the content, and the closing tag. And then within your opening tag, you can also have attributes. So you can define classes for if you want to add styling, or if you can also define an ID for your specific element, or you can define other things as well, which you'll see later on. But that's the gist of the anatomy of what an HTML element contains. And in HTML, you can also nest elements. So this is, I guess, this is very important because elements need to be nested properly in order to be displayed, be rendered properly. So here we have a correct nesting example of how you would have nesting in your HTML. And then here, this code or this HTML snippet would render something very incorrect. So you just want to make sure that when you're nesting, that the elements are nested properly in the correct order, one inside another. And the next thing is we have some empty elements. So these elements have no content, and they're called empty elements because you would embed things on the page instead of placing an actual piece of content on your page. So one example is that it's very common, it's an image element. So you can specify the source of the image, and then you can also specify the alternative attribute. And this is useful in terms of accessibility, or just in general, if the web page doesn't load, the user will be able to see a description for what the image is supposed to represent. So yeah, so sometimes, like for example, if you see on Facebook, some people, if you see their profile picture doesn't load, sometimes you'll see like a description saying person smiling or something like that. So that's essentially what the alt is. And then, like I mentioned, there's no closing, and it just embeds an image on the page where it appears. And now we're going to talk about the anatomy of an HTML document. So earlier we talked about what an HTML element looks like, but now we want to think bigger picture as to how usually you would structure an HTML document. So first, we have this required preamble at the beginning. Basically, it's just needed so that your HTML document behaves correctly. And there's like a long history as to why it's needed but I won't go into detail as to like why exactly it's needed, but you just need to have this when you have an HTML file. And after this, we have this opening and closing HTML tags, and this element wraps the entirety of your content on the page. So this is also known as the root element if people refer to this, if people refer to the root of the page. And then next we have the head element. So this is a container for everything you want to include on the page that isn't the content that you're showing to your page's viewers. So for example, you might have the title of your page, you might specify your style sheet. You might define your fonts here. There's things that you can include for search engine optimization. So these things are not actually, you won't be able to view physically the things contained in here, but they will be part of your HTML document. And yeah, so keywords, page descriptions, and yeah, next, so going into the head, so we have this meta element. So this element just sets the character set for your document, and it's this is by standard. You should set it to UTF-8, and this just includes most characters from the majority of written languages. And for this title, this is pretty important, I guess. So this is what you see. This is the description of, or the name of your page when you bookmark this page on your browser. And here, moving on, we have the body element. This contains basically, essentially, all of the content on your page. So yeah, essentially everything that you see will be defined in here. Yeah, so moving on, we have some other elements that are used to mark up text, and these are headings. So we have different levels of headings. So for example, H1 to H6. Typically, people would only use H1 to H4 just because usually on a page, then there's not as many, the information hierarchy doesn't need to have that many levels per se. So you'll typically only use H1 to H4, but there's these other ones that you can use. And in marking up text, you can also have lists. So you can have an unordered list, or you can have a ordered list. So unordered list, you would just see like bullet points, whereas ordered list, you would actually see numbers for the items inside. So here we just have an example. So unordered list, we just have an unordered list here, and we would have these 2 bullet points for what nwPlus represents. And next, we'll be talking about hyperlinks. So these allow you to embed links on your page. So if you want to have a link that is associated with this text with nwPlus, then you would be able to add the link into the href section. So this, or in the href attribute, and this stands for hypertext reference. And one word of caution is that when you're embedding links, when you're adding links into the href attribute, it's really important that you test out whether the link works or not, because sometimes omitting the extra S or omitting the protocol, you might see unexpected results. So always test if things work before embedding them on the page. And yeah, let's see. Do we have any specific questions for what I mentioned? Anything that really stands out to you guys? Okay, great. So I assume that the teams are monitoring the Web Dev Workshop channel, and thank you guys for doing that. But yeah, if you guys do have any questions, definitely don't hesitate to ask in the channel, and then we'll be sure to get to them. Yes, so I think I've talked enough about what HTML really is. So next, we're actually going to start building out our portfolio, starting with the basic HTML elements. So yeah, let's get started. So you want to actually get your text editor ready. So let's see. So just to start, what we're going to do actually is we're just going to create the root directory, or the folder that would contain our portfolio. So I'm just going to navigate to this folder, and then I'm going to just create a new folder inside. And for those of you that want to deploy your site onto GitHub Pages, it actually allows automatically automatic deployment for your account if you name your repository, or if you name your folder your GitHub username .github.io. So for me, I'm going to just name it like this. But for those of you that don't want to deploy it, that's totally fine. Yeah, and you can also change the name of this folder later if you want. But yeah, I'm going to just make it my username.github.io, and then let's see. Now I am going to open up that folder and let's see. Okay, and then we are going to get started. So we have our text editor here, VS Code. I'm going to just make it bigger. So we're going to create a new file called index.html under this new directory. And we're just going to get started. So just to start, we're going to just type in the basic things that are needed in an HTML document. So if you recall the doc type HTML preamble, that is required. And then you have this HTML tag. And inside this, we would have our head element. And just so that everything displays properly, we just want to include this UTF-8. Yeah, so one thing to note is that for my my text editor, I have autosave, or my formatter automatically formats when I save. So I recommended this extension for you guys to download called Beautify, but basically if you have a formatter, you can actually choose to make it autosave when you save, every time you save your document, and that makes it a lot easier so that you don't have to explicitly do like a keyboard shortcut in order to save your document. So if you go to preferences and you search up autosave, let's see. I think actually it was named, one second. Oh yeah, actually it's called format on save, my bad. Okay, yeah, format on save. Yeah, so mine is enabled here. Yeah, so if you want your formatter to format things automatically when you save, just click on format on save or enable it. That's just a side thing. And yeah, let's just get back to what we were doing before. So right now we have body, and inside the body, we're just gonna have like a very simple sentence. My name is Jenny. Okay, let's just have this. Yeah, so this is what we're gonna start with. And there's there's different ways to view how your document looks like. So I know that one extension I recommended for everyone to download is the live server extension. And you can actually open or preview your HTML file by opening it through the live server extension. If you right click and then click on open with live server. So you can do that. And then I'm going to show you also an alternative of how you would view your document. You can also view it just by going on the document and then clicking on open with Google Chrome. And then you'll see another copy. And then another way of opening it is you could open it through your terminal. So you would just go to terminal, new terminal, and then open index.html. And that would automatically open a new window. For now, I'm going to just have the live server version just so that I don't have to refresh my page. But for those of you that don't have the live server, what you might have to do is refresh your page every time that you save your work. So yeah. Yeah, so right now, if you make any changes, just remember to save, and then you'll be able to see your changes here. And yeah, so you have a very simple, basic HTML page here. And let's just go back to, yeah, so moving on, we have a basic version of our page, but one thing to start thinking about is how you want to actually structure your page. So when you start planning out what your portfolio might look like, it's really important to consider the information that you have on your page and kind of design it or plan it out. So here I just have a high level overview of what I want to include on my page. So I have different sections, for example, the intro section, the about section, the projects, and then the contact section. And when I usually start building a page, I start with like a wireframe just so that I have a basic idea of what I want to do. And yeah, this is just really important so that you don't end up kind of figuring out as you go. Yeah, this is just so that you would have a blueprint of what you're building before you actually start building it. And when you work with designers as well in an actual collaborative setting, this is very common when you're translating designs into an actual finished product. So yeah, let's actually get into building out some of these components. So let's just go back to our text editor here. And we're just going to leave the top section alone, but we're going to start adding more content into the body section here. So inside the body section, as we saw earlier, we have first the intro section. So what we're going to do is we're going to just have start a div element and have our intro section there. So let's see. So first, we're going to just start with a profile picture of what you look like. So we have the image element, and then in the image element for the source, what we're going to do is we're going to actually just use a placeholder image, and you can just type this in. This website has a bunch of placeholder images of different dimensions. If you ever want to mock up, like build a very basic version of your site. So yeah, so once you have this, you can click on, I think I'm gonna make this bigger. Hopefully people can see this clearly. Yeah, so we have just this basic image here, the placeholder image. And going back to what we've been working on, after this, we're just gonna have H1. And we're just going to add, hello, my name is Jenny. Okay, pretty straightforward. And now when you hit on save, oh yeah, I forgot to mention it's Command S on Mac. I guess if you're on Windows, then it would be Control Save, but I think you would also be able to save on here, so you can click on save. Yeah, so as you see here, we just have, hello, my name is Jenny. And here we're just gonna have a blurb about like who I am, what I'm studying. I'm a fourth year Bucks student at UBC. Okay, great. So that's our intro section. And yeah, let's move on to the about section. So this is kind of what it looks like. We have 2 columns, but right now we're just going to start with 1, and we'll just format it as we go. So for the about section, what we're going to do is we're going to start another div, and for the first thing we're going to have is the paragraph element. So we're just going to say, like, have a short snippet about who I am. Okay, I guess I'll just say I love nwPlus. Very cool. Okay. And next, we're going to utilize that unordered list. So we are, 1 second. Okay. Technical difficulties here. I think my keyboard ran out of power. Just going to plug it in here. MacBook user problem. Okay, yeah, continuing on. So we have our div element here. 1 second. I'm gonna just use the one on my laptop here. Okay. Okay, great. I can type now. Okay. Sorry, just some technical difficulties there. So we have our unordered list here, and then we have like a kind of like a heading for your interests. So I would say like some of my interests include, and then underneath this, I would start the tag for the unordered list, and then inside we'd have different list items. So I really like dogs, so I'm gonna just put in dogs, and then dog spotting, because who doesn't like dogs? And then yeah, so we have this unordered list, and if we go back to our document, you'll see what was typed in here. If you don't see it, make sure you refresh your the your browser and check that you've saved your document. And yeah, so moving on, we're gonna just go into the project section. So this is what you see here. Right now, we are going to start with a new div, and then we have a heading for projects. So let's just put in projects. And then for the images, what we're going to do is use the placeholder images again. So like what we did earlier, we're going to just want to type this in placeholder.com/300. So we're just going to use one that is 300 in width and height and dimension. And then you're just going to copy this and then basically paste it 3 times so that you would have 4 projects to display on your page. And if you save and go back to the document, you would see these 4 placeholder images. And you notice that these are in line, but later on, we're going to stylize these so that we see 2 columns. And yeah, next we will move on to the contact section. So in the contact section, we have our links. And so for example, if you're a dev, you would put in like your GitHub info. If you are, I guess, a designer, you would put, I don't know, maybe the link to your Dribble or other like form of portfolio. So we're going to have our link, and then inside we're going to have the unordered list again, and then inside we would have our list items. So and for this one, we're going to use the link attribute here. So or the anchor element. So we have, for me, I'm going to just put in my GitHub. I happen to have it memorized because I guess when you're applying for jobs, they ask you to put in your GitHub, but I just like have it copied so many times that I just memorized it. So fun fact. Yeah. Next thing, you might want to put in your LinkedIn as well. So we're going to start a new list item. LinkedIn. Let's put my LinkedIn here as well. LinkedIn.com. I also happen to have that memorized just because, like, why not? Yeah. So I'll put in my LinkedIn, and next I will put in my email because that is very important for people to reach you. Mail to, and for me, I'm gonna just put in my email here. Email. So when you hit save and you go back to the document, if you don't have the live server, make sure you refresh your page. You'll see these links. So if you click on GitHub, ooh, that will take you to my GitHub. Oh, okay. I think you can. Yeah, so basically these would embed the links for you on the page. And yeah, so the next part we're going to add for the contact section is we're going to just add a form for people to contact you. So this part, we're going to start another div element. And let's see, links. Oh yeah, divs. So we have the form, and then we have a label, and then we have this for attribute, which is, I guess, for to define where what your label is associated with, or which ID or which element your label is associated with. So for here, you want to have the label, and then here we have an input field, and we're going to just say that it's of type email. And when you put in type equals email, on some mobile devices, actually, they would automatically have like different shortcuts, like the .com button on your keyboard. So sometimes just for ease of use reasons, you might want to specify the type of input that you have. And for our placeholder text, this is another type of attribute. And let's just say enter your email. And yeah, so you'll see that you have this placeholder text, and we'll put another label for the message. And then for your message, we're going to have a text area. And so this text area is just like a bigger version of the input field that you have. So your message here. And the last part is we're just going to have a button for people to submit to. I'm going to just put it, make it of type input again, and then give it that submit. Yeah, so when you save, you'll see these three fields here, and with a button for submitting your form. And yeah, it actually doesn't do anything when you click on submit. So I think that's it in terms of just the basic outline of our page. I think we have the basic content down. So yeah, let's go back to learning a bit about CSS now that we've built out the basic components or the content of our page. So moving on to CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it's the code that styles your web content. So it's what makes your content look good. So just like HTML, CSS is not a programming language, and it's not a markup language either. It's actually a style sheet language used to selectively style different HTML elements. So for example, you can have this CSS snippet to style your paragraph elements on your page. And yeah, you can make all of your text red. And talking about the anatomy of a CSS element, so the whole structure is called a CSS Rule Set. And people usually refer to it just as a rule. And so at the top, you have your selector, and then you have these curly braces, and then you have your property followed by the property value. And then every single line is a declaration. So you can have multiple declarations within your CSS rule, basically. And moving on, we have different selector types. So we have the element selector. You can also select IDs or classes or different attributes or pseudo class. So for example, an example of pseudo class is like if you hover over a text, like what would be the style that's applied to that text. And this is not an exhaustive list. So if you wanted to see more, you can also check out the link I provided by it's by Mozilla. They're a great resource. And yeah, this is just summarizing what I described as well. So this is just telling you what it selects. And yeah, and then these are just some examples of how you would use the different selectors. We have, yeah, okay. So we have two boxes here, and you might be wondering, like, what are these boxes? Like, how does that relate to CSS? So in CSS, when you're thinking about actually implementing your designs, it's really important to think in boxes. So CSS layout is based on the box model, with each box having these properties. So you have padding, border, and you have margins. So if the border is the box, the padding is basically the space that is inside the box, so that the space between your element and the content inside your element. And the margin is basically the space around your box. So if you take a look. And this is just illustrating what I mentioned. And later I'll mention, or I'll introduce to you guys Chrome DevTools, which is really helpful as well. So we have border, and then we have the padding. And that's the space between your element and the content inside your element. And then you have the margin, which just takes up the space around your element. And yeah, I guess the questions are being handled, but maybe I'll take a look at the chat. Let's see. Okay, okay, I guess there's no, okay, yeah, I guess I'm gonna just continue. So questions, and then so now I'll introduce to you guys how to use Chrome DevTools. And so DevTools is a set of developer tools built directly into Google Chrome. So other what's it called? Other browsers have DevTools as well, but I like to use Chrome's because of how comprehensive it is and what you can do with it. So DevTools can help you edit pages on the fly and diagnose problems quickly. And later on, I'll show you exactly how to use it. So in order to open up DevTools, this is how you would open it up. So if you want to open up a panel, if you open up the panel that you last used, you would use Command Option I. This is what I use like most frequently. If you want to open up the console, Command Option J. Oh, this looks a little bit. Let me just switch it back to. I was viewing in mobile mode earlier. I'm gonna just switch it back. So the console is essentially what is here. So you can have different messages or warnings that are printed. And the elements panel it says console here, and the elements panel is what you see here. So here you can actually see the HTML elements. So when you hover over them, you can also see what is being displayed. And here you can also see the styles. So yeah, I'll dive into how you would use this and how you can change it in real time too. And so moving on to our next part, what I want to show you is that you can actually view the padding, margin, and the border of certain elements on your page. So when you go into the elements panel and you hover over, let's say, a certain element, you're able to see these three different attributes. So on the Mac, what I actually like to do is I do Command-Shift-C to view the different elements on the page. So as you can see here, if I just hover over like the theme, this is essentially the element, and then, or this is essentially the content here. And then here we have the, so the orange part is like, if you can see it clearly, is like the border, and then the green part is the padding. This is probably not a good example, but yeah, if you look here, the green part is the padding. And so you can see like how certain things are being implemented on the page. And then another thing that you can do is you can change how things appear on the screen just by going here. So if I wanted to change, I guess maybe this is not a super good example. If I wanted to just change some text on this page, what I can do is just go here and then or anchor elements to red, or all your links to red, which might not look good. But that's just how you would change things from DevTools in real time. You can also add extra declarations. So for example, you can have, okay, let's say if I wanted to add a color here, color red. Don't know if that changes anything. Let's see. Why don't I change this? Yeah, so if I change, if I wanted to just add a color here, for example, you see that I can actually just make it red, or just change the styling by playing around with the DevTools. Different options that you can do, or different things that you can do with the DevTools. Yeah, so this is just, I should probably collapse that. So yeah, this is just giving you some examples of how you would use this. And as I mentioned earlier, the orange part is the margin, and then the yellow is usually the border, and then I think the green is the padding. Yep. Yeah, so that's it in terms of DevTools and CSS. There's probably other things that I don't know. I'm not an expert, but if you do find like interesting things, I think it's DevTools is a super useful thing when you're doing web development. Yeah, so next thing we're just gonna dig into adding CSS to our portfolio. And let's see, we're gonna just go back to our code here. And so going back to what we have, I mentioned earlier that in your head element, you can add in certain things like a style sheet, or like a specific font for your site. So for example, here, because we're adding CSS styles, we actually want to just link a new style sheet here. But before we do that, let's just make a new file called styles.css under the same level as index.html. So let's just name it styles.css. Oh, not CS. Okay, cool. And now we will have link, and rel just means like relationship, style sheet, href. You would just put in styles.css. The reason why we don't have a link like HTTPS or something like that is that in href, you can also have relative paths. So if styles is in the same folder as index.html, you can just simply put in styles.css, and then it should be able to recognize where it is. And yeah, so that's how you would integrate a style sheet into your HTML page. And let's go into styles.css here. So here we're just going to start with a very basic selector. So we're just going to have a paragraph selector. And then let's say if we make that, you can actually change the type of the style of the font. So if you make it italic here, let's see, and you go back to the page, you see that all of the paragraph elements are italicized. You might want that, but I don't know if that looks good. But here it's important to know that P, our paragraph, is the selector, and this is the element we want to stylize. And yeah, so we want to actually use some class selectors. You might have remembered that from the part about the different types of selectors. So you can have like a class font, and then you can specify the font weight, bold, and then you can also add like a color. And then once you save that, if you put it into your HTML, like let's say if I say class equals cool class, then and if you hit save and then go back to your page, you see that this is this turned green. So that's how you would select a class. I'm just going to delete it just because it might not look good. And then you also have ID selectors. So for ID selectors, you can have, I'm going to just delete this. So in terms of declaring your ID selector, you would put in this, the hashtag, or what is it called? I don't remember. So what happens when I'm yeah, okay, yeah, we'll talk about it. Yeah, so if you say blue and then you put in like ID equals cool ID, you see that, 1 second. Oh, it's cool. Okay, let's just change this to ID. You'll see that all of these turn, oh, this H1 heading turned blue. So yeah, this is just demonstrating to you how you would selectively style different types of things. And yeah, so in terms of the actual styling, we won't actually start styling this our portfolio, but we're columns of content that we see on the page. And so we have in the about section, we have 2 different columns, and how we can achieve that in these sections is using CSS Grid. You might also have heard of Flexbox, but for today, we're just going to go over, we're just going to use CSS Grid for today. So CSS Grid allows you to structure your web page into columns and rows. So it's a 2D structuring of your content on your page. And then you can basically define like how many columns or how many rows you want to have. So for example, this is what you would have with this CSS declaration here, or CSS rule here. And so you have the grid table. It's really important to have these declarations inside your grid table. So you want to set the display to grid. And then you also want to specify the number of rows. So here we just have two rows. And then here we specify the number of columns. And then when you put this inside a div element, and you have six elements inside that parent element, you would be able to create this table if you put class equals grid dash table, which is what we have here. And yeah, another thing is when you are when you're building out your page, you also want to consider the responsiveness of your page. So that is done usually through media queries. So media queries essentially is a block of CSS code that only runs if a given condition, for example, this what is inside here is met. And so these are some other examples of what media queries of I guess, different media queries that you can have. You can specify the width, you can specify the style that would be applied to certain widths. And I want to show you a quick demo of why that is important. So if you go back to, if you open up Chrome DevTools, you see actually there is an option for you to toggle the device bar, the device toolbar, and you'll be able to select how your page would look like, or you'll be able to preview how your page looks like on different devices. So if you're on iPhone X, obviously you don't want the same kind of web page that you'll see on your browser. And when you're building out your portfolio, some people, I guess, they might be on their phone. So it's really important to make sure that your site is responsive. Yeah, when you're building it out, so it can be used across different devices. And yeah, so now we're gonna go back to our page and then add in some responsiveness to our portfolio here. And yeah, second. So we have, let's see. Okay, so sorry, 1 second. Just got a little bit lost. Yeah, so basically what we're gonna start with is having a container to position our portfolio. So we're just gonna create a new container class that would contain our elements, just because if you look at our page, it's really close to the border of your screen. And so if you go back, yeah, it's really close. So we just want to give it some space to breathe. And so we're just going to create a new container class. And then we're going to set the max width to 840. And then we're going to also set the margins auto. So basically, this is a shorthand version of a margin declaration. So the first 0 represents the top bottom margin, and then the second, the auto represents left and right. So this ensures that your content is, your container is centered on the page. So if we wanted to add that, we would actually add that into, actually going to have just a new div and then class container. And then what we're going to do is make it surround the entirety of our document, because that's what a container is, I guess. And so if you save and then if you go back, you'll see this, the preview here. Great. So going back to our page, we are also going to work on the, we're also going to work on the headline section. So right now, let's see. For the intro, we're going to create a new class. Just for the purpose of demonstration, I guess we're going to just make it center aligned. Center. And for the intro part, let's see if we put the class here, intro, and you'll see that our intro section is center aligned here. Yeah, and then now we're going to move on to the about section. So for the about section, we actually wanted to have 2 columns. So the first one is this one, and then we want to actually have this content right next to the this text here. And so right now we're actually going to be using Css Grid to help us implement this. So to actually do this, so we're going to just start with a new class about grid. And when you're working with CSS Grid, you want to have this declaration display as grid, and then grid template columns 50% and 50%. It just means that you want to split halfway down your page. And then for we also want to stylize the items in the About section. So this is just the grid. So for the About section, we want to just align our text centered and then text decoration. I guess it's not really needed. Okay, so text align, center, and then now we have the About section. So just to encapsulate the About section, we are going to have a...
Sorry to interrupt, Jenny. You have a typo in your CSS from earlier.
Oh, okay.
So instead of line 11, instead of grind.
Oh,
you're all good.
Right. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, because we're all grinding, I guess, for exam season.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so for the About section, in order to have this grid, we would need to surround the whole section with another div element. And then in the class, you would just specify About grid. And yeah, if you look back at your preview here, we just have, you see that all of the text is centered. And then for the list, something we want to do is we want to add like no padding on the list. So just to make it, just to decrease the amount of space. So let's see, for the list, About list, let's just say padding 0. And for here, we are just going to put in class About list. And let's see. There, okay. About list. Okay, I think. 1 second. About section. Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot. So for the About section, didn't use that yet. So class About section. Oh, oops. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, that looks really weird. Okay. Yeah, so you actually don't want to have the bullets. So one thing I'm going to do is in the About list, what I'm going to do is add a list style and just say none, just to get rid of the bullet points. And there we go. So we got rid of the bullet points for the About list. And yes, so if we actually look at the different elements, so let's open up DevTools again. So I have Command Option I, but I actually want to see the elements. So Command Shift C, and that's not, we don't want iPhone and we don't want mobile. So yeah, if you hover over the elements, you'll see these two different, these two columns where we contain our elements. So yeah, that's the CSS grid that you see there. And we want to actually make it more responsive, just because if you see on, let's say, iPhone, you'll see that everything is super small and I guess like very hard to see. And the text ends up like being super small. So if you were viewing this on your phone, it would be really hard to tell like what the content is. And yeah, so we actually want to make our site more responsive by instructing our browser to show a different view or show a different kind of styling when the web page is in mobile. So the first thing we're going to do actually is we're going to add in this other element in the head. So we have viewport content device width. we're just setting the device width to the default width of the device that you're on. And then the initial scale, we're just going to set it to 1. Yeah, so we're going to just save this. And yeah, Meta just allows you to control like basically the dimensions and the scaling of the page. And yeah, so if you wanted to make it like extra big, you could make it 2, but I wouldn't recommend that. So yeah, so earlier we learned about, I guess, media queries and how we can leverage that in order to make our page more responsive when you have different devices, when you view your page using different devices. So one thing we're going to add into our styles is we're going to add in some media queries, just so that we have only one column, or not 2 columns in the mobile view. So media, we're just going to specify the max width and 480 pixels. And yeah, we're just going to set the breakpoint to 480. And then basically for the about grid, what we want to do when the max width of the page is 480, we just want to set the grid template. Set the grid template columns to just 100% so that it's only 1 column. So if you take a look so about grid, and if you take a look here, this changed to only 1 column because it fits within the because the max width of our device fits within this breakpoint here. And
one quick thing. Do you want to just go over very slowly about all the styles that you've done through the CSS so far, like walking through each and how it maps to the classes that we've gone through?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Just as a quick break, because I think right before media queries, let's just go over all the CSS that we've done.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'll go over the first one. So for the container, we have the max width. So we're essentially setting the max width of our page. And if you go back to the HTML document here, let me just make it split screen so it's easier to see. Make it a little bit smaller maybe. So yeah, so for the body part, so inside we have this div to container whole app. So if you look at, yeah, so basically we're just setting the max width, and then we're setting the margins. So the top bottom margins are 0, and then the left and right are auto, just so that our container is centered on the page. And then second, we have the intro section. So for the intro section, we want to just align our text on the center. So when applied to the actual HTML document, you see here that we're selecting, if we specify class equals intro, we can make sure that all of these elements are centered on the screen, or all of the text on here is centered. And then we have the grid. So for the grid, you need to have some sort of parent element to contain all of your other elements on the page, to contain all of your children elements, so that you would have the grid. So for the about grid, we say display grid to specify that is a CSS grid. And then we have the grid template columns, which is 50-50, just so that it's an even split and it's 2 columns on the page. And yeah, so if you look at the first one, we have, if you look at this element as a whole, we have 2 divs inside this one div, and each one of them would take up half of the page. So each would take up 1 column basically. And yeah, so for the about section, we have this just text align. So this would just align your items on this would just center align your items. So when you place this here, it would center align this within this column. And then for the second about section, it would also center align your bullet points or your list on within this column. Yeah, and the about list. So for this list, we just wanted to get rid of the padding on the list. And actually there wasn't really any padding to begin with, so I don't know why I did that. But one thing that kind of stood out was that there were still bullet points when we center align the text. So we just said list style is none, just so we can get rid of the bullet points. So this is what this unordered list represents. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And then moving on, I guess we were just working on the media query, which would make it so that when you're on mobile and the max width of your screen is 480 pixels, you would only have one column instead of two columns for your CSS grid. So just to make your page more responsive.
Hey, Jenny, to catch everyone up, do you think it's okay for you to just copy or just take your files and then upload them into Slack as the state that they are in now?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we'll just do index.html and styles.css and just stick them into
okay.
Slack.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so that's the index.html. And then we have, okay, I hope people are not like super confused. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Yeah, cool. So let's see. Going back to what we had before, actually, I think, okay. I think I just want to talk about one thing, I guess, real quick. So I know, Eamon, if you're here, I know you added like the URL to your site, but I think it's important to differentiate your local development environment from what is deployed on what is like a deployed site. So I guess this is just important to cover. So I guess you're on your local development environment, it's just spinning up a server, a local server for you to have. But when you copy this, and if someone decides to use this address on their own machine, it would actually reference it would actually use their own, I guess it would actually reference what is on their own computers, so it wouldn't actually be viewable if you decided to copy this link and then paste it to someone. So yeah, just because it's not deployed, so people are not actually able to view this. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Yeah, so like local just means that you're only able to see your own changes. And when you deploy it, let's say on GitHub pages, then other people will be able to see your page. And yeah, it's just pointing to like where the source code is. Yeah, so we're going to actually make some similar changes for our project section. So for the project section, if you recall, we had two columns. So we're just going to do the same thing. And so for the two columns for the project section, we have we're actually just gonna, I guess, just to make it easier, we're gonna just say projects and then just create a new heading for this. And so for the heading for the projects, we just want to text align. We just want to center align the text. And then for the projects, we are going to add another grid. And then 50-50. I think technically we can just use the about grid. Actually, I think we can do that. Let's see. Yeah, we can do that actually. So for the about grid, let's see. Yeah, we can't do that, but I think for now, I'm gonna actually just keep it separate, just so that if we have any additional styling that we want to do for this grid or different kind of behavior, we can have it applied separately. And then we also want to stylize the image for our project. So justify self, center, and then padding. I guess so I think that's okay. Oh, whoops. We just want to center the image on the basically inside the column that we have contained. So if we add this to the HTML here, we have, let's see, class, div. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add in the heading for the projects first. So heading, oh, oops. Heading, and then we're just gonna open up a new div just to act as a parent element for our all of the items like our images. So if we add that, if we contain all of the images, they should all take up like one. They should all take up like one grid or one cell in the CSS grid. So let's see. Did I make any typos? I don't think so. Heading, project grid, and then, oh yeah, so we want to add here project image. So you can copy and paste this. Okay, so if we save this, let's take a look. Okay. Projects, heading, projects, grid, display grid, grid template columns. Okay. I think. Okay, let's take a look. So the styling is not showing for some reason. Let's see, projects, grid. Grid template columns.
Maybe hit save on styles.
Oh yeah. Oh my god.
All the time. You have no idea.
Oh my god, totally. Okay, I didn't realize. Thanks, Allison.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah, I would usually see it. Oh my god, thanks. But now you see it. So yeah, I guess when you hover over it, you'll see that the cells that we've created in our CSS grid here. Yeah, thanks, Allison, for that. Yeah, so another thing we want to add actually is we want to add in another media query. I guess this one might be a little bit different, but we actually want to add in another breakpoint. So with 650 and projects grid. So the reason why we have max with 650 is just because we want to only display your these two columns if the screen size is big enough. So if it's like smaller, then it would just 1 second. Yeah, I guess if it's just a smaller screen, let me see if I can make it illustrate this. Yeah, so I guess technically we can make that make it 480, but we just want to have like a larger breakpoint just because our content is slightly bigger. So we would require like more space for our content. So if you take a look and if you try to toggle the width of the screen, you'll see the change. Yeah. Okay, so going back to what we had. So for the contact section, that's the next thing we're going to work on. So in the contact section, we also want to have 2 columns. And so basically, we're just going to do something that's very similar. So let's actually go into the CSS here, and then we're just going to create a new class for contact, and then display still we want to have grid. I don't know why I keep on typing. Okay, grid template columns 70%. And yeah, so we actually for this we actually want to just not split it evenly, just because our content here is not as, the link is not as long. So we want to just make it a little bit smaller. And for the links, we want to just center them on their within their columns, and then links list style is none. So we just want to get rid of the bullet points, and then also apply 0 padding to them. So let's see, for the contact section, let's just create a new parent div to contain the links and also the form here. And so class, let's see, we would just have the contact section. And if we take a look here, let's see, I think I should have split it. Yeah, so I think, let's see, contact, and then for the heading, we just want to add in the heading class that we had earlier. And then for the unordered list, let's just add in the links list. And then for the different links, let's add in this add in the link class. So here, if I save this, let's see, will it show? Okay. I think so, the grid is showing, but for some reason the links are not being centered, huh? Okay, interesting. Justify self center class. Let's see. Style is none. Okay, so seems like it's not being centered, but I think we're just going to come back to this just because we have some other things that we want to stylize. And yeah, so for the links, actually, we are going
forward. Let's paste the styles code again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and hit save.
Okay, save.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, did I? Oh, right. Okay, links. Thank you to whoever pointed it out. My bad. Links, and let's see. 1 second. Links, center. It's not centering for some reason. Let's see. Yeah, I think we'll just come back to this after. But if you guys have any other ideas or like suggestions, feel free to let me know. Oh yeah, actually center, I think this is spelled correctly, justify self. Okay, that's strange. Okay, yeah, so similar to the about section, we're just gonna have another media query, super quick one, max width 650, and let's see. Just gonna say contact actually. Yeah. Columns 100%. So if we have this and if we change it to the mobile view, it should change to one column it should change to one column. Yeah, so I think we've made it pretty responsive. And yeah, I think that's it in terms of the contact section. The next thing we're gonna do is actually just add in like more advanced styling for our site. Yeah, so the last part, super quick. And so for the images, we're actually just gonna, what my plan was for you guys to replace the images with your own images. But I guess maybe we're a little bit short on time, so I think we'll just skip that actually. But what I'm gonna do is I actually have some placeholder images that I might wanna use, and I shared them, I placed them on a Google Drive, I guess on a Google Drive folder if you guys are interested, or if you guys want to download them, feel free to use them. I'll just paste them into the, I'm gonna just paste the drive link here. So feel free to download those images so that you can use them for this here. But what I'm gonna do is I'm actually just going to, let's see, is downloads, documents. Okay, let's see, where is, oh yeah, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just paste them or move them into my, okay, I'm gonna just move them into my folder, and then I'm gonna just rename this images, just so that my HTML file has access to these images here. And yeah, so let's start replacing the actual images. So for the profile picture, let's just replace that with images / profile picture.jpg. So like I mentioned earlier, you can have relative paths inside your source. So if you go back to the actual site, you'll see that it replaced it with the dog. That's nice. And we're just gonna add some styling to the image as well. So for the styling, what we're gonna do is, let's see, we're gonna go into the intro section again. Whoops, intro. Profile picture. We're actually just gonna make it circular, and then for the width, I will set it to a fixed width of 160 pixels, and then height 160, And then let's see if we add this to our profile picture. Okay, that is okay. Cool. So the height, and then we're gonna add in just a box shadow. So for this one, basically the first, I'll just type this in, and then I'm gonna just explain like what each of them what each element represents. Let's just say I'm gonna just like make this up. Okay, so basically this represents, so for the 0 just represents the offset of the X offset, and then the second one means how like it's Y offset, and then this is the blur radius, this is the spread radius, and then basically the last element is the color. So if you look here, you see there's like a faint shadow on the image. And yeah, we're also going to add in something else, like another style, hover. So this is, we're just selecting a pseudo, we're applying this style to a pseudo selector, which is hover. So for this one, for shadow, we're going to just make it 8, 0, and then let's just add in, actually, yeah, let's copy the same thing. So we're just changing, I guess, the blur radius when we hover over it, so that it would look like it would look like it's lifted off the screen. I guess it's like effect. Yeah, so that's one thing you can do, and then you can kind of play around with it too. And yeah, so let's see. One thing we can also add is, I'm thinking, okay, actually, I think I'm gonna just move on to the other, replacing the other images, just in the interest of time. So for the images, I'm gonna, yeah.
Wait, Jenny, as an aside, maybe we can just wrap up and then come back to the images and do the deployment. But I think like for those who are time crunched, we can just do like a quick wrap up of just your end slides, and I'll post the feedback link, and then we can come back to this for people who are still sticking around.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, so I just replaced one of the pictures for the project section, but yeah, it's totally up to you guys if you want to add that in. And then the next thing I was gonna do is just adding the custom font, but I guess maybe I won't do that. So let's see. I guess my original plan actually was kind of like to just give you guys the instructions for the deployment, just because sometimes it can be a little bit like tricky and it might take some time. But basically for people who are interested, these are the instructions to publish your site on your on GitHub using your username.github.io. So what you would do is you would create a new repo called exactly how you named, or the same name as the folder where you had your portfolio, and then you would go into the directory, and then you would just push your project into your new repo from your command line. I mean, I don't know how this will go, but if you are interested, feel free to screenshot this page and try it on your own time. So yeah, these are basically like the instructions for deployment for people who are interested. And yeah, so I think with that, I might actually just go back and just just change the font, just so I can show you guys how to change the font. And then if on your own time, you can feel free to change the images as well. Just in the interest of time, maybe we won't do them today. But for the font, I will show you how exactly to replace the font on your page with a new font. So you can have, here we're just using a font called Noto Sans and Roboto Mono. So these are all free fonts. So I'm gonna just type this in, .com. Oh no. And then display is, okay, so I'm gonna just copy this link into the Slack channel. And then here we have, if we save this, what you'll see, oh, I forgot to close this. Yeah, that's what happens. Okay, the relationship is also gonna be style sheet, because this is just applying a style to your font. Yeah, let's see. I just close this. And then in the body, we are going to, or in the CSS, we're just gonna create some new rules for, so for the font family, we are going to do Noto Sans serif. And then for the other headings, H2, H3, H4, we're just going to specify the font family as well to be Roboto monospace. Okay, if we save this and go back to our page, we see that the font is actually changed to this new font. So I think that's pretty cool. You can decide to like set your own fonts, or if you come across a free font that looks better, definitely feel free to use that. And I think what I'm going to end with is just changing the background color. So I think for the background color, let's see, body. So you would put this into body because it's you're specifying this element here. So background color, I'm gonna just say, I just have this okay, green. So yeah, that's basically what it looks like if you change the background color. Yeah, I think just because we're running a little bit late, I think I will just end it there. But I just want to offer you guys like some ideas for how you can even further enhance this. What you can do is like you can also add in different styles for when you hover over the images. So for example, for your projects, what you can do is when you hover over the image, you can have, I just wanted to show you an example. So when you hover over the image, you might want to display like the name of your project. And then you can also just make it a link and then link to another page so that when you click on the image, it would link to like a description of your project or like some sort of demo. Yeah, and this section obviously needs some work. And I think obviously if you were to play around with like some JavaScript as well, you can maybe try to make the form submit work. And yeah, I would say, I don't know if this looks really, I feel like this doesn't really look that good, but just because we're a little bit short on time, this is what we have. But I think this is something that you can definitely work off of after this workshop, and definitely you can also feel free to deploy it as well. I guess just because we don't have that much time, we won't go over the deployment part. But feel free to take this down and use this when you want to deploy it. And yeah, so before we end this, I just want to give you guys some extra resources for going forward, how you can expand your knowledge of web development, or how you can enhance your portfolio. Obviously, the source code is here. Mozilla has really good documentation on just HTML, CSS in general. It's a lot more detailed, a lot better than how I'm explaining it, I think. It also includes a lot of accessibility related content that's really important when you're building a public website. And nwPlus also has a series of self-learning resources for those who are still learning, I guess, on your path of tech, and definitely recommend checking it out. We spent a lot of time on this. And yeah, I think so. For people who are interested in, I think I just copy this onto the, oh, okay. Actually, I think it's okay. Yeah, so if you want to see the source code, basically if you go into the repo I have here, it's exactly the same as almost basically the same as what I have here. So yeah. And yeah, just to end it off, this workshop was hosted by nwPlus. We want to be inclusive, and so we're basically a club for aspiring programmers and designers at UBC, and we host these events. Definitely come to our future workshops. Next week we have, I believe, data science, so that's super interesting. And then we also have an API workshop. So yeah, definitely encourage everyone to come out, and don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions, or if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn or any of our TAs. Yeah, definitely go ahead and do that, and please fill out the feedback form as well. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.